Film of the week, Crazy, or C-R-A-Z-Y, if one wants to call it. Can't play a clip from it because it's a French-Canadian film, and I have to say, it arrived with the fantastic publicity blurb that said, huge hit in Canada, has been seen by almost everyone in Quebec. Now, saying that a film has been seen by almost everyone in Quebec is not necessarily a good thing. It's rather like saying it was the biggest hit in Bratislava that year. I mean, you know, I like the Quebecoians, or whatever it is they're called.
Quebecois.
Is that what they're called?
I believe so.
Fine. But I don't know that saying, hey, everyone in Quebec gave this a thumbs up is necessarily a big come on. It's a coming-of-age movie directed by Jean-Marc Vallée. It's an epic story of a family ruled over by a father who is besotted by Charles Aznavour and, of course, by Crazy, the song Crazy, which is, I don't know why it's C.R. Is that how the title of the Patsy Cline song is written? I thought it was just Crazy.
I think it is just Crazy.
Yeah, so
I could look it up, but with 2 minutes to go...
No, don't quite get the acronym thing. An awful lot of it, although not all of it, an awful lot of it is set in the 1970s, and it's so, for one thing, it has a great nostalgic charm for me, great use of pop music, David Bowie, for example, Pink Floyd, and I admit that being a man of a certain age, that obviously has a pull on my heartstrings. Some people have criticised it, saying it is the least gay movie ever made, and therefore it is a movie that is embarrassed about its sexuality. No, it isn't. It's a movie that's not about being gay, it's a movie about being confused about your sexuality, and the movie is confused about its central character's sexuality, and that's perfectly fine. And would people please stop dictating what the sexuality of movies ought to be, and don't even start me on cheesecake and beefcake, because I've had too many rounds about this to go into. The other thing about it is, which is notably absent for most of the coverage of it, is the film has a strangely spiritual dimension. The central character is born on Christmas Day and is believed by his mother to be able to perform miracles, and during his adolescence, in which his sexual identity is up for grabs, his relationship with his religion becomes particularly fraught. There are great dream sequences, one absolutely lovely moment in which our hero levitates in a church to the sound of Sympathy for the Devil, you know, the Rolling Stones song being sung along by these angelic choir boys, and yet it doesn't seem pretentious or posy or out of place. You just think it's part of the flow and the tapestry of the film itself. A really, really interesting, insightful, intelligent piece of work that I think has been somewhat underrated by people who want it to be more of a political tract.
And that's the movie of the week.
It is.
Don't forget...
The other thing out this week is Dead Silence, which is the film made by the writer and director who made Saw, and who therefore accidentally kicked off the so-called torture porn which doesn't exist cycle. While everyone else is still ploughing, or still flogging that particular dead horse, they've gone back and made this really old-fashioned devil doll movie. It's a Hammer-style movie. It has nods towards Mario Bava, and it's at the beginning of the film, somebody's partner is killed by a ventriloquist doll. So it's that film, you know, it's Dead of Night, it's magic, it's dolls, it's all those devil doll movies that you've seen before, all put together in this kind of quite, you know, affectionate homage. It's all misty castles and it's all cronky camera angles.
It's an affectionate devil doll movie.
It is an affectionate devil doll movie, and actually it was really funny. I was watching it, I was thinking, I'm quite interested in this, I'm quite glad these guys are doing this, I'm quite glad they like these films. The problem with it is that although it's much more interesting than making yet more so-called torture porn, which as we know doesn't exist, you do sit there thinking, this feels so familiar that it's not in the slightest bit scary. I mean, actually, generally, dolls are quite freaky. You know, dolls' mouths move in strange ways in their eyes. That's why horror movies use them all the time. But I sat there the whole of Dead Silence thinking, I quite like this, I quite admire its intentions, but it's just not frightening. And I'm sorry, it's like the comedy thing. If it's a comedy movie, it has to be funny. If it's an action movie, it has to be exciting. And if it's a horror film, in the end, it has to be scary. And the problem with Dead Silence, not scary.
Eye for India is this absolutely lovely documentary. It's the story of a family that came from India to England in the 1960s, and the director's father came to England and wanted to have a way of communicating with his family back in India. And so what he did was he bought 2 cine cameras, 2 projectors, and 2 reel-to-reel tape recorders. And rather than sending letters, which took a long time to write and weren't very... he would make little cine films, and then he would read a commentary with his family over the cine films, and he would send them back, and then they would do the same thing. They would make cine films and send them back. And it's an absolutely wonderful little documentary, and you get an incredible sense both of British culture through the 60s, through the 70s into the 80s, also a fantastic sense of the culture back home that he's left behind, this terrible sense of him having abandoned his family. He's sure that he will go back, but he doesn't, he really can't make it work, and then finally the whole family do move back and it doesn't quite work out. Then they end up back in England, and then the next generation of the family then move on. It ends with one of the daughters in Australia. Now, I know that there's an awful lot of documentary stuff around at the moment. When you look at things things like Tarnation, which is people basically taking their own historical stuff and turning it into... I mean, there's a sense that some people have that there's something narcissistic about this. Eye for India has none of that whatsoever. It's an extraordinary portrait of a culture. It's an extraordinary portrait of a family. I mean, the greatest compliment I can pay it is that at the end of the movie, you feel like you are part of this family.
Wow.
It's 71, 72 minutes long. It's very, very understated and unpretentious, and I really thought it was a lovely little film and very well assembled, and really goes to show what you can do if you have a wealth of material, because editing material is not easy, but it's beautifully constructed and very, very moving.
Okay.
So briefly about Sherrybaby, because this is important. Maggie Gyllenhaal got a Golden Globe nomination for Sherrybaby, in which she plays a young woman who comes out of prison. She has overcome a drugs problem. She comes out, she's on parole, and she needs to stay clean and stay on the right side of the law and attempt to reunite herself with her 4-year-old daughter, from whom she is estranged. It's very much a Sundance film. The Sundance Film Festival, which is sort of indie-pindy, you know, everything's very noodly, and that's fine, and all the guitar, it's all very ambient, and it features a very good performance by Maggie Gyllenhaal. That's, you know, it's really out there. It's a very brave performance. I think it's slightly too raw and slightly too naked for what is actually required. I think she's a great actress. I would rather see her, I suppose, doing this than doing Stranger Than Fiction, although I still wait for the great Maggie Gyllenhaal film. This isn't it, but she is good in it. And incidentally, hello to Jason Isaacs, who we always say hello to around this time because he podcasts from around the world.
Anything else to mention?
Very quickly, Goya's Ghost, which is a new film by Milos Forman. I have about 10 seconds. What I'm going to say is Milos Forman made Amadeus, your favourite movie, People vs. Larry Flint, Man on the Moon, etc. It's not really about Goya. It's about the Inquisition, and it's kind of like Ken Russell light, strange version of The Devils. Very good performance by Javier Bardem. In the end, all over the place, but at least politically ambitious. Very quickly, just to say Nancy Drew, which is a totally witless updating of the old Nancy Drew stories set in a modern setting, but you wouldn't know. No, I know, I'm just doing it very quickly, just to say you wouldn't know it, and it has none of the charm of the Nancy Drew stories that anyone would remember. PG contains infrequent mild language, violence and threat, and also is just rubbish all the way around. I sat there thinking, would my daughter like this? And the answer was, I really sincerely hope not. Waterhorse Legend of the Deep. If you've seen the trailer for Waterhorse Legend of the Deep, right, it's a kids' film, PG. Little boy finds an egg, egg hatchet, Scottish boy finds an egg hatches into a sort of reptile thing needs water, starts living in the loo, gets too big to live in the loo, they have to take it out into Loch Ness, put it in Loch Ness.
Is this Dave Morris's film?
It is Dave Morris's film.
I saw him this week.
Yeah, right, fine. Well, here's the thing, it's one of those perfect examples of the whole film's in the trailer. It's quite a cute film. I quite enjoyed it. I mean, despite the fact the young guy in it, the young lead, is the kid who was in Millions, and he does really well, particularly with a script that asks him to say, and I'm not making this up, he has to say jings every other word, and he's surrounded by people who are called Jock and Jimmy, and then of course Dave Morrissey as the stiff face of British upper class sternness, because it's in the middle of the war, and the family have been billeted with the English army, the British army, and his mother is played by Bess McNeill from from Breaking the Waves, the movie that gives you motion sickness, and it's nice and charming and sweet and funny. But if you've seen the trailer, you've seen most of the film.
Weekly Miss Potter at 4.
Horrible. Absolutely horrible. And Renee Zellweger doing that, oh, I'm English, oh, look at me doing English, I'm pursing my lips and doing English. And incidentally, it is alleged that Renee, then in her absolute genius, went off on one about, oh, yeah, it was really horrible having to make the film because of Silent Field and the Isle of Man. Renee, stay in Texas. And incidentally, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4 is available on video. Just buy that and remind yourself from whence Miss Zellweger came.
What else is new?
The Painted Veil, an adaptation of a novel by Somerset Maugham, or as I'm sure they say in the American novels, by Somerset Maugham.
Ed Norton, I think.
Ed Norton doing an English accent. The story is 1920s English couple played by Ed Norton and Naomi Watts, both of whom are, of course, Yanks. She's feisty. She wants to get away from her home. The only way she can do it is by marrying. Ed Norton proposes to her. He's uptight and stuffy and difficult. They have, unsurprisingly, an unsuccessful marriage, and she is unfaithful. Norton discovers the infidelity and then basically gives her a choice. He says, either I will give you an ugly divorce, which will be terrible for everyone, but I don't care. He just says it in that accent as well. He says, or you can accompany me to this absolutely cholera-ridden village in China, where we will surely both die. She opts for the cholera-ridden village in China, and as you can see the way that the story's going. When they're out there, they meet up with the third part of this triangle, played by the mighty Toby Jones, who's the character who's been out there for a long time and kind of pretty much gets a handle on what's happening with their relationship. I have to say, from the outside, the signs are bad. I don't like the poster. It looks like it's going to be sort of heritage filmmaking, which I can't stand. Directed by the guy who directed this film, We Don't Live Here Anymore, which was a film that was so awful that it prompted me to write an article about how we should boycott all movies in which actors take roles as producers, because actors tend to produce movies in which they get to do a lot of thesping. And We Don't Live Here Anymore was a movie, actually Naomi Watts was in it, in which everyone acted a lot, and they all acted at each other a lot, and they all did a lot more acting, and then they acted some more, and it was just a ghastly, terrible sort of lovey fest. And also it's a story about, misery, death, cholera, suffering, adultery, and that.
But it's got Ed Norton in it.
Yeah, no, Ed Norton's good. Ed Norton's not the best thing in it, but he's good. Funnily enough, Ed Norton's English accent is a little bit not quite there, although it suits the character that he's playing, because the thing about the character he's playing is he's uptight, he's hesitant, he's stuffy, he's difficult, he is very, very hard to like. But of course what happens during the course of the story is that whilst they're out there in this village, she sees in him qualities that she hadn't seen before, and he sees in his wife qualities which he hadn't seen before. For those of you who familiar with the story, I'm not going to pretend I'd read the Somerset Maugham, I hadn't. I have to say I found it very affecting. I thought it was very, very good piece of work. Very well played, extremely good cast. Managed to make what is, frankly, a very difficult story. Imagine pitching it to the American studio. Yeah, it's about people going and getting, cholera, blah, blah, Diana Rigg, Mother Superior. No, you're not going to get any money for that at all. But it doesn't feel like a worthy production. It actually feels like a very truthful story about relationships. It's a grown-up film. It has mature themes in the way that word really ought to be applied. Nowadays, mature themes means Quentin Tarantino, jumping around with an axe, and that.
So the mature themes here are what?
Immature, stupid, adolescent. I've nothing wrong with immature, stupid and adolescent, but please don't call it mature, No,
but the mature themes
here... Oh, sorry, I thought you meant it. The immature themes here it's actually to do about real grown-up people discovering that there is more to each other than they knew from the outside, and that actually there is more to life than frivolity, and there is also more to life than just simply burying yourself in your work. I'm sure that there is more in the novel, but I think there are probably things in the film that aren't in the novel. As I said, I can't compare the two because I haven't read the source, and that's the one criticism I would take is I know that some people say, okay, if you read the source novel, there are untransposable themes. But I found it very moving. I had a little bit of a tear in my eye.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I did.
It's been a while, actually.
It has.
I thought you were drying up.
No. I thought that and I really did not expect to be moved by The Painted Veil at all. I really thought I was going to come out of it thinking admirable, well made. Here's the most interesting thing. The film is beautifully shot, but it took me until that point in the review to say it. If you start a review by saying it's beautifully shot, what you mean is, but it's empty and vacuous, and I ended up looking at the scenery. If you end a review by saying the film is beautifully shot, it means it was a really good film, and you know what? It was beautifully shot. Very quickly saying the final 10 seconds, the other film that's out this week, Shortbus, famous for being the most explicit film the BBFC have passed, blah, 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 but it's not a film about sex. It is a film about people and relationships, and it's funny and sweet and charming, and it's a hardcore movie with a soft-core heart, but it is absolutely for adults only.
Movie of the week?
Shortbus, oddly.